Imagine spending like $50 million on a new highway phase. You open your project management dashboard, you check the budget spreadsheet, and every single indicator is glowing this beautiful, reassuring green.
Right, everything looks perfect on screen.
Exactly. But now imagine putting on a hard hat, walking out onto the actual construction site, and realizing barely a fraction of the concrete has actually been poured.
Oh man, that is the worst feeling.
It's a nightmare. You are bleeding cash, you are months behind, but your software is basically telling the executive board that you're doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, and the terrifying thing is that's the reality for a shocking number of mega projects. I mean, the paperwork succeeds, but the physical project completely fails.
Well, today we are serving as your guides for episode 2 of the AI&GB Consulting Masterclass series. And, if you caught episode 1 of this masterclass, we really hammered home a massive realization.
Right, that scope and risk are the true underlying drivers of accurate civil engineering cost estimating.
Yeah, we spent that entire deep dive looking at the critical work that happens before a single shovel even hits the dirt. Because getting that budget right is, it's everything.
Because a flawed estimate means you are fighting a losing battle from day one. You're essentially mathematically doomed.
But today, we are crossing the threshold. The budget is approved, the executives have shaken hands, the ribbon is cut, the heavy machinery is mobilized, and the actual construction begins.
The fun part.
Right. You would think the theoretical part is over.
Yeah.
And it's just about execution now. But we are exploring a fascinating source document from Dr. Armelle Malcomb, the founder of AI&GB Consulting, which argues that this is exactly when the most catastrophic hidden failures occur.
Yeah, she explains why perfectly estimated infrastructure projects still manage to completely derail.
And why the entity supposedly keeping them on track, the Project Management Office, or PMO, needs to completely abandon its traditional identity and become what she calls resilient.
And the shift she's demanding, it's not some minor operational tweak. It requires ripping out the bureaucratic foundation of how we track progress and, replacing it with hard engineering mathematics.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand the solution, we have to look the problem dead in the eye. When most professionals hear Project Management Office, they do not envision a dynamic engine of success. They picture bureaucracy.
Oh, 100%. They picture an administrative black hole. The stereotype, which, to be fair, exists because it's so frequently true, is that a PMO is just a bloated layer of overhead.
Yeah, Dr. Malcolm calls them the traffic cops.
Yeah.
These are the people whose entire job description seems to revolve around, scheduling mandatory update meetings.
Chasing engineers down for their Friday timesheets?
Yes. And color-coding massive Gantt charts just to make a presentation slide look palatable for the C-suite. It's really just an exercise in administrative comfort.
And in the realm of complex civil engineering, or really any large-scale operational rollout, treating project management as an administrative function isn't just inefficient, it's actively dangerous.
It's like navigating a cross-country road trip by only looking at your bank account instead of a map.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. You check your phone, you see you've spent exactly half your travel budget, and you declare to the car, "Great news, we must be exactly halfway to California."
Meanwhile, you've just been driving in circles around your own neighborhood buying incredibly expensive snacks.
Exactly. Your financial projection matches your bank statement perfectly, but your physical reality is a complete disaster.
Dr. Malcomb provides a devastatingly clear equivalent to that road trip analogy using a concrete pour. So, say a contractor is hired to pour the foundation for a massive new facility. A month into the job, they have burned through 50% of the allocated budget.
Okay.
But physically, on the ground, they've only poured 20% of the concrete.
Anyone with eyes can see that's a catastrophic ratio.
But an administrative PMO doesn't look at the ground. They look at the burn rate. They ask, did we spend the money we planned to spend this month? The answer is yes.
Wow.
So they update the dashboard, the status is marked green, and the executives sleep soundly. They are looking exclusively in the rearview mirror at financial exhaust. By the time that dashboard inevitably turns red, the project is already millions of dollars in the hole, and the schedule is completely unrecoverable.
What's fascinating here is the distinction the source draws between two entirely different disciplines, like project administration versus project control.
Yes, that is the dividing line. Project administration is just historical documentation. It's taking notes on what money left the building yesterday.
Right.
Project controls, though, is a predictive science. Specifically, it is the science of variance analysis. Project controls engineers don't just ask what we spent. They analyze the exact physical value we gain for that spend.
And they hunt for the mathematical anomaly, right?
Exactly, like the gap between the budget burn and the concrete poured, and they find it long before it impacts the bottom line.
And we aren't just talking about a few mismanaged spreadsheets here. The scale of the fallout from administrative PMOs is staggering. The article brings in data from the Project Management Institute, showing that organizations waste over 11% of their investment dollars due to poor project performance.
Think about that. 11% of a billion-dollar infrastructure project is $110 million evaporating into thin air because of blind tracking.
It's insane. And the American Society of Civil Engineers constantly reminds us that we are staring down a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure backlog. We're talking about bridges, power grids, water treatment plants, and hospitals that desperately need to be built or replaced.
And in a backlog of that magnitude, a systemic inability to execute without massive delays and overruns is a crisis.
Yeah, and you can apply this to your own industry too. If you are managing a massive software rollout at a tech startup, and your PMO is just checking to see if the engineering team logged their hours, you are flying blind. You might be burning through your venture capital runway without actually building a viable product.
The Traffic Cop method fundamentally cannot fix a systemic issue because it just doesn't understand the physical reality of the work.
Which brings us to the alternative. If the rearview mirror approach is a trap, how do we actually fix it? The source document argues for redefining the PMO entirely through an engineering lens, moving away from administrative oversight and moving towards strategic execution.
Right.
There's this powerful quote in the text from Dr. Harold Kersner. He's a globally recognized authority on project management. He states that the future of the PMO is not about administrative control. It is about strategic value delivery and driving business results.
Strategic value delivery is the key phrase there. The PMO is no longer a passive observer taking attendance. It is an active participant tasked with ensuring the project actually yields what it promised.
And Dr. Armelle Malcomb took this evolution and built her Ph.D. research around it, focusing on a concept she calls schedule resilience. This is the core of our masterclass today. She roots this concept deeply in her background in civil engineering.
Yeah, in structural engineering, resilience is a very specific physical property. It's a material's ability to absorb energy and deform without fracturing. Think of a skyscraper built in a seismic zone like Tokyo or San Francisco.
Okay.
The absolute worst thing you can do is build that skyscraper to be perfectly rigid.
Because if it's completely stiff, the kinetic energy of an earthquake has nowhere to go.
Yeah.
The building will just snap in half and collapse.
Precisely. So structural engineers design the building to sway. They engineer flexibility into the joints. When the shock wave hits, the building absorbs the kinetic energy, it deforms slightly, it sways back and forth, but the structural integrity holds, it bends, but it does not break. Dr. Malcomb takes that exact physics principle and maps it onto project management. A resilient schedule is one that can absorb massive external shocks, like a paralyzed supply chain, a week of torrential rain, a sudden gap in municipal funding without the entire project fracturing.
Wait, doesn't any delay on a multi-million-dollar project ruin the schedule?
Yeah.
How do you absorb that without panicking? Because if the steel shipments are blocked at a port for 2 weeks, or a hurricane shuts down the job site, you are bleeding cash.
Well, you avoid panic by understanding the first of the 3 core pillars of a resilient PMO outlined in the text, which is the critical path is king. A resilient PMO mathematically models the risk of the project so they know exactly what matters and what doesn't.
So they aren't treating every single task on the calendar equally.
Far from it. In any massive project, whether it's a hydroelectric dam or a global software launch, there is a specific mathematically defined sequence of dependent tasks that dictates the final completion date. You cannot do step C until step B is done, and B relies on A.
Okay.
That absolute longest sequence is the critical path.
If we bring this down to a human scale, imagine you are building a custom house. Pouring the foundation and framing the walls are on the critical path. You physically cannot put the roof on until the walls are up.
Right, obviously.
But landscaping the front yard or painting the spare bedroom, those are not on the critical path. You can plant those bushes almost any time before you hand over the keys to the buyer.
In engineering terms, planting those bushes has what we call float. There is wiggle room. So if your landscaping crew gets a flat tire and shows up 4 days late, an administrative PMO might panic because a date on a spreadsheet turned red.
Yeah, they'd freak out.
But a resilient PMO looks at the mathematical model and sees that the landscaping delay does not impact the critical path. The final delivery date of the house remains entirely unchanged. They have absorbed the shock. The building swayed, but it didn't break.
But if the concrete truck bringing the foundation material gets a flat tire and is delayed by a single day,
Then the alarm bells ring at maximum volume. A one-day delay on a critical path task equals a one-day delay for the entire multi-million-dollar project. The schedule is not just a to-do list, it's a topological map of where your vulnerabilities live.
here's where it gets really interesting. Because once you accept that your schedule is a mathematical model of risk, you have to figure out how to measure that risk in real time. How do you actually know if you are winning or losing the battle against the critical path? The source introduces the second pillar of the resilient PMO, Earned Value Management, or EVM.
EVM is the absolute engine of this entire methodology. It completely eliminates administrative guesswork by forcing you to triangulate three variables simultaneously: scope, schedule, and cost.
Instead of just looking at the two dimensions of time and money, EVM adds the physical reality of the work right into the equation.
Exactly. It translates physical engineering progress into hard financial data. Let's look at the mechanics of how this actually works using our earlier concrete example. Say you have a budget of $100,000 to pour 100 cubic yards of concrete over 10 days. We are on day 5. You have spent $50,000.
Okay, so the administrative PMO looks at the calendar, sees day 5, looks at the bank, sees 50,000 gone, and says we are perfectly on track.
But the project controls engineer goes out to the site and sees only 20 cubic yards of concrete have been physically poured. EVM takes that physical reality and calculates the earned value. If you have only poured 20% of the total concrete, you have only earned 20% of the total budget's value.
You've earned $20,000 worth of value, but you spent $50,000 to get it.
Exactly. EVM generates a metric called the cost performance index. In this case, your index is 0.4. For every dollar you spend, you are only getting 40 cents of physical value in return.
Wow.
The variance is violently exposed the very second it happens. There is no hiding behind a green dashboard.
And the real magic of EVM isn't just taking a snapshot of today's disaster. Because it uses these hard performance indexes, it allows you to forecast the future. A resilient PMO can extrapolate that 0.4 cost performance index and tell the executive board, if we do not change our methods immediately, this specific phase will finish 6 months late and 150% over budget.
Which is the entire point of project controls. If you know you're going to drive off a cliff in 6 months, you have 6 months of runway to steer the vehicle.
Yeah, you have time to actually do something.
Right. You have time to fire the underperforming subcontractor, source different materials, or authorize overtime. You are making strategic decisions based on mathematical foresight, rather than finding out about the catastrophe the day before the ribbon-cutting ceremony.
But having that mathematical foresight is entirely useless if the PMO doesn't have the institutional courage to share it. That brings us to the third pillar in Dr. Malcomb's framework: radical transparency. The PMO must be a truth teller.
It sounds like a buzzword, but in practice, it is the hardest pillar to implement. A resilient PMO refuses to manipulate the data to appease stakeholders.
We all know the immense political pressure that exists in corporate environments. Nobody wants to be the person who walks into the boardroom to look the CEO in the eye and tell them their pet project, the one they promised the shareholders would be done by Q3, is secretly bleeding cash and miles behind schedule.
Right. Nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news.
The temptation to massage the numbers, to tweak the spreadsheet just enough to keep the executive dashboard green for one more month is overwhelming.
It's an act of self-preservation for the administrator, but it is a death sentence for the project. Radical transparency removes the human bias and the office politics from the equation. It delivers objective, data-driven assessments regardless of the political fallout, forcing the leaders to confront reality when they still have the leverage to actually fix the problem.
And to achieve this level of truth-telling, a resilient PMO requires some serious computational horsepower. The article points out that we have moved way beyond basic spreadsheets. They are integrating deep engineering knowledge with advanced data analytics, specifically utilizing programming languages like Python and MATLAB.
Because a spreadsheet is static, it cannot handle the complexity of a mega project. When you have a schedule with 10,000 interconnected tasks, shifting supply chain variables, and fluctuating labor costs, You are not managing a list. You are managing a massive dynamic equation.
Right. And by using Python, a PMO can run Monte Carlo simulations. They aren't just looking at one outcome. The code runs 10,000 different simulated versions of the project, factoring in the probability of rain delays, the probabilities of concrete shortages, and the probability of labor strikes.
It calculates the statistical likelihood of hitting your target date, exposing risks that a human brain staring at a Gantt chart would simply never spot.
That makes total sense.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you start to realize why this level of extreme mathematical rigor is absolutely necessary. Dr. Malcomb didn't just theorize this in a university vacuum. She brings over 20 years of experience, heavily concentrated in the federal arena.
Yeah, the source details her extensive history managing complex infrastructure portfolios for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the Department of Veterans Affairs.
These are entities responsible for some of the most complex, high-stakes construction on Earth. We are talking about retrofitting active VA hospitals, building massive flood control dams, and expanding military installations.
And in those federal arenas, resilience and radical transparency are not just nice philosophies, they are mandated. When you are dealing with federal taxpayer dollars on a massive scale, the data must be audit-ready from day one.
Exactly. There is absolutely zero tolerance for the traffic cop illusion. If your EVM numbers don't add up, the funding gets frozen.
The article describes this as a battle-tested federal rigor. And what AI&GB Consulting does is take that brutal, uncompromising standard, that engine of truth, and apply it across two totally distinct global spheres. The first is applying it right back to U.S. government agencies and prime contractors.
For those clients, a resilient PMO is the ultimate shield. It ensures strict compliance with federal acquisition regulations. It guarantees accurate, independent government cost estimates, which ties us right back to the foundation we established in episode 1 of this masterclass. And it produces bulletproof, mathematically sound documentation that will survive the most grueling federal audits imaginable.
But the second sphere of application might be even more fascinating. AI&GB Consulting takes this exact same federal-level rigor and applies it to international development partners and African infrastructure initiatives.
This is where the concept of radical transparency becomes truly transformative on a human level. Imagine an international development bank pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into crucial infrastructure in West Africa, like a new regional power grid or a vital transportation corridor.
In international development, a failed project isn't just a quarterly loss on a corporate balance sheet. It means a community doesn't get access to clean drinking water, or local farmers cannot get their goods to a central market. The stakes are flesh and blood.
Using a resilient PMO, driven by EVM in these environments, ensures that development funds are utilized with maximum efficiency. It provides absolute transparency to the international donors, the local governments, and the engineering teams on the ground.
It prevents the capital from disappearing into the void of administrative reporting or bureaucratic inefficiency. It flags the variance the moment the value earned drops below the money spent immediately, so corrective action can be taken before the funds just evaporate.
It takes a highly volatile environment and moves it from chaos to control.
So, what does this all mean? If we synthesize everything we have unpacked today from Dr. Malcomb's masterclass, it demands a fundamental shift in how we view the mechanics of progress. A project schedule is not a calendar. A schedule is a living, breathing, mathematical model of risk. And if your tracking systems are only built to tell you what happened yesterday, you are entirely leaving your future to chance.
The project management office must evolve. It has to stop being the administrative burden that chases timesheets and start being the most valuable strategic asset your project possesses. It must be an engine driven by hard data, engineered to absorb massive shocks, and uniquely designed to tell the unvarnished truth.
Which leaves you with a critical question to mull over as you step back into your own professional life. Think about the dashboards, the spreadsheets, and the tracking metrics you interact with every single day. Are they built like a traffic cop, simply rewarding you for spending time and budget without ever measuring the actual physical value you have earned? The next time you sit in a meeting and see a project marked green or on track, ask yourself, is this just an administrative comfort blanket, or is it a mathematically resilient truth?